Hi, I'm Andy Jones, content editor for Plaid's online education program, Let's Paint. Today, I'm going to show you how to do round brush strokes. Let's get started. Today's skill builder is going to focus on brush strokes using a round brush. We'll learn to do a straight comma stroke, we'll do a comma to the left, and a comma to the right. When selecting a round brush to do brush strokes with, make sure that you pick a brush that has a very fine point to it. You want to make sure that the brush length is long enough to hold an ample amount of paint and that it has a nice round ferrule. Today I'm going to be using Folk Art acrylic paint in Naphthol Crimson. So I'm going to put some paint out onto my palette, and Folk Art paint is very rich and creamy in consistency. That's great for most painting techniques, but for brushstroke work, your paint needs to be a little thinner. It actually needs to be the consistency of bird poop. So I'm going to add some water to my paint to thin it down and mix it thoroughly with a palette knife. And to check the consistency, I'm going to scoop the paint up and it should just drop off the palette knife just like poop. Get in the habit of wiping your palette knife off on a paper towel. Every time you finish using it, wipe the surface and the edge before you set it down. If you start having good habits like this, it'll help you further down the road because you won't accidentally pick up a dirty palette knife and put it back in your paint. So, to load your brush to do a brush stroke, don't just stab the brush into the puddle of paint. Start and stroke the brush into the paint, making little pulls so that you completely fill the brush with paint. There is no need to try to twirl the brush to a fine point. The paint's not thin enough for that. So load your brush with paint, and you want to make sure that it's very, very full. So I'm going to come over to my work surface, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to do a stroke. You're going to touch the brush to the surface. You're going to apply pressure to the brush. Then you're going to begin to pull the brush and lift and drag the brush to a point, just like an exclamation point. So again, load your brush thoroughly with paint, touch the brush down, apply pressure, begin to lift and drag the brush to a point. Now I can guarantee that the first few strokes that you try are not going to be your best effort, but keep practicing and you will be able to do this. Again, touch the brush to the surface, apply pressure, begin to lift and drag the brush to a point. Many of you will make a common mistake, which is to touch the brush to the surface, apply pressure, and then pick the brush up. That is not going to help you lift the brush to a point, and you'll end up with an oddly shaped stroke like that. Remember, it's a fluid motion, touching the brush to the surface, applying pressure, and gradually lifting and dragging to a point. You can make the comma angle to the right or to the left, and it's the same basic stroke. You're going to touch the brush to the surface, you're going to apply pressure, you're going to lift and drag, but this time you're going to curve the brush just like a comma. A nicely formed head and tail should line up. So let's do another one of those. And you don't twist the brush. If anything, you might lean the brush to the inside of the stroke, but you're going to touch the brush to the surface, apply pressure, and you're going to lift and drag to a point. Try to make this stroke in one fluid motion. Touch the brush to the surface, apply pressure, lift, and drag. Now we'll make one go in the other direction. And everybody that paints has a better direction. Some people can make them like this better, and some people will make them in the other direction. Touch the brush, apply pressure, lift, and drag to a point. It will feel awkward to you doing the stroke in this direction because it's just a little unnatural, but you're going to touch, press, and then begin to lift and drag the brush to a point. You can begin doing things like nesting the strokes so that you touch, press, lift, and drag to a point. I'm going to make a smaller stroke just inside that one, and then a smaller stroke inside that one, and yet a smaller stroke. All done with the same size brush, all with the same technique. The only difference is the amount of pressure that I put on the brush. The more pressure you put, the larger your stroke will be. If you apply very little pressure to the brush, you can make a series of very small strokes. When you practice making brush strokes, don't just make rows of strokes. Try to vary up the way that you paint them. Do some to the left, some to the right, some straight, and you will do beautiful strokes some days. Other days, your strokes might not be so great, but don't beat yourself up. It's just a matter of practicing. Touch the brush to the surface, apply pressure, lift, and drag the brush to a point. Make commas to the left or commas to the right. Doesn't matter which direction you go, the stroke remains the same. Touch, press, lift, and drag to a point. This is something that anyone can learn to do. You just have to practice a little bit. Let me put my brush down and let's review what we talked about today. We talked about using the round brush to create comma strokes, using a straight stroke, which looks like an exclamation point, a comma to the left, and a comma to the right. You can use the same stroke to create a design using larger strokes that graduate to smaller strokes or strokes that fill in. It's important that you learn how to do round brush strokes so that you're in control of the brush and it's not in control of you. To become really good at brushstroke work, you're going to have to practice some. We've made it easy for you by creating free downloadable practice guides. Simply visit the link below.